Hello everyone, if you enjoy my channel, please support me with one like, one subscribe, and one share.
The mentor who changed my direction. What if the person who changed my business life did not start with money, a big office, or a perfect English lesson? She started with one question that I was not ready to answer. I was living in the United States, balancing work, marriage, children, and the quiet fear that I was not good enough. I thought I needed more confidence. I was wrong. I needed someone to show me how to see opportunity when my own mind could only see problems. My name is Anna, and this is the story of the US mentor who changed the way I work, speak English, love my family, and see myself. I still remember the first time I met my mentor, Daniel, in a small coffee shop on a cold morning. I had prepared business questions in my notebook. Unfortunately, my hands were shaking so badly that the notebook looked ready to escape. Daniel smiled and asked, "What do you want your business to become?" I gave him a long answer about customers, income, marketing, and competition. He listened quietly. Then he said something surprisingly simple, "You are talking about money. I am asking about your life." That sentence stayed with me. I had been studying business as if it were a complicated English test. Learn the vocabulary. Memorize the rules. Avoid mistakes. Hope nobody notices when you forget a word. But Daniel taught me something different. Business was not only about numbers. It was about people. It was about listening. It was about asking better questions. And strangely, that made English easier for me. When I stopped trying to sound perfect, I started speaking more naturally. I practiced simple phrases like, "What does the customer need? How can I help, and what is the next step?" They were not fancy sentences, but they were useful sentences. Psychology research supports active practice. Meaningful use can strengthen memory more than repeating words without context, especially when emotions matter deeply. So I stopped treating English like a school subject and started using it in real life. Every conversation became a small lesson. Every mistake became evidence that I was learning. Then, just when I thought I understood what Daniel was trying to teach me, he invited me to a meeting with a business owner. I expected advice. I expected questions. I did not expect Daniel to introduce me as the person responsible for presenting the idea. My stomach dropped. My English suddenly disappeared. And then the business owner looked directly at me and said, "So, tell me why I should trust you." I had 10 seconds to answer. And what happened next changed everything. My first lessons in American business. "So, tell me why I should trust you." For a moment, I forgot every English word I had ever learned. My mind became completely empty, like a computer that had decided Monday morning was a personal insult. I looked at the business owner, then at Daniel, my mentor. He did not rescue me. He simply smiled. That smile told me something important. This was my test. I took a slow breath and said, "Because I will listen before I promise." The room became quiet. I was not sure if my English sounded professional, but I knew the sentence was true. The business owner leaned back and asked, "What do you mean?" I explained that I did not want to sell something just because I wanted money. I wanted to understand what people actually needed. Daniel had taught me that good business begins with listening, and that lesson suddenly felt more valuable than any business vocabulary in a textbook. The meeting continued for almost an hour. I made mistakes. I paused too long. Once, I used the wrong word and accidentally made everyone laugh. Thankfully, they laughed with me, not at me. I laughed too. That small moment changed the atmosphere. I realized something about learning English. When you are terrified of every mistake, your brain spends so much energy protecting you that there is very little energy left for communication. But when you accept a mistake as part of the conversation, you become more relaxed. I began asking simple questions. Who is your customer? What problem are you trying to solve? What makes your service different? These questions were not complicated. They were practical. And practical English was exactly what I needed. After the meeting, I walked outside with Daniel. I expected him to tell me whether I had done well. Instead, he asked, "What did you learn?" I said, "I learned that I need better English." He shook his head. No. You need better listening. That answer surprised me. He explained that many people think business communication means speaking more, using impressive words, and sounding confident. In reality, strong communication often begins with paying attention. His lesson reminded me of something simple. People remember how you make them feel more than how many impressive words you use. From that day, Daniel started teaching me business in a very different way. He showed me how Americans often discuss deadlines, customer expectations, pricing, follow-up, and trust. I wrote everything in my notebook, but I also wrote down simple English sentences I could actually use. My confidence slowly grew. My business ideas became clearer. Even my conversations at home became calmer because I was learning to listen before reacting. Then, one Friday afternoon, Daniel called me and said, "I have something for you." His voice sounded unusually serious. When I arrived at his office, there was a contract sitting on his desk with my name on it. I thought he was offering me my first real business opportunity. I was wrong. The contract was connected to a decision that could put everything I had built at risk. Learning English through real conversations. The contract on Daniel's desk looked harmless, but my hands were already cold. I sat down, opened the folder, and started reading. The English was simple enough to understand, but the meaning behind the words felt much bigger than the sentences. Daniel watched me carefully and said, "Do not sign anything until you understand what you are agreeing to." That was another business lesson, but it was also an English lesson. I slowly read each line aloud. I did not try to speak quickly. I stopped when I needed to stop. I asked, "What does this part mean?" Daniel explained it using simple examples. I repeated the sentences in my own words. That small exercise taught me something I had never understood in a classroom. Real English becomes easier when you connect words to a real situation. I had spent years worrying about pronunciation, grammar, and embarrassing mistakes. Now I was sitting in a real American office, using English because my decision depended on it. Suddenly, English was not a subject. It was a tool. The contract was for a small business project involving a local company. If I accepted, I would have to communicate with customers, organize schedules, discuss prices, and solve problems. It sounded exciting. It also sounded terrifying. I looked at Daniel and asked, "Do you think I can do this?" He smiled and answered, "I think you can learn to do it." I noticed the difference. He did not promise that everything would be easy. He was giving me permission to learn while doing. So I accepted the opportunity, carefully and honestly. My first week was messy. I wrote notes everywhere. My kitchen table looked like a business battlefield. There were invoices beside my children's homework, English vocabulary beside grocery receipts, and one lonely banana sitting on my notebook like it had been promoted to office manager. Every morning, I practiced 3 simple phrases before work. Let me make sure I understand. Could you explain that again? I will get back to you. These sentences became my safety net. Instead of pretending I understood everything, I learned to ask for clarification. That changed my communication immediately. I also discovered that American business culture could be surprisingly direct. People often wanted clear answers, clear deadlines, and clear responsibility. At first, I found that stressful. Later, I found it freeing. I did not need 10 beautiful sentences when one clear sentence could solve the problem. Daniel kept reminding me, simple is powerful. Slowly, I became less afraid of conversations. I listened more carefully. I spoke more naturally. I even started enjoying meetings. But something unexpected happened at home. My new business responsibilities began taking more of my time, and my husband noticed. One evening, after the children went to bed, he looked at me and said, "I am happy you are growing. But I am starting to feel like I am losing you." His words hurt more than any business mistake. And for the first time, I realized that learning how to build a business might be easier than learning how to protect the love inside my own home. When business tested our marriage. My husband's words stayed with me long after the house became quiet. "I am starting to feel like I am losing you." There was no anger in his voice. Somehow, that made it harder to hear. I had been so focused on proving that I could build something meaningful in America that I had forgotten something more important was already sitting at our dinner table. The next morning, I woke up early, packed lunches for the children, and looked at my calendar. Meetings, customers, emails, business calls, school activities, family time. The page was full, but my heart felt strangely empty. I realized that success can become a very clever thief. It does not always steal your money or your opportunities. Sometimes it quietly steals your attention. That weekend, my husband and I sat together after the children went outside to play. I told him about Daniel, the business, the contract, and my fear of failing. He listened. Then he said, "I do not want you to stop. I just want us to succeed together." That sentence changed the way I looked at our marriage. I had been thinking about business as something I was building alone. But our family was living inside the consequences of every decision I made. So we created a simple rule. When we were together, we would be together. No business calls during dinner. No checking messages while helping the children with homework. No talking about money at midnight when everyone was exhausted. It sounded almost too simple, but simple rules are sometimes surprisingly powerful. Psychologists often emphasize the value of focused attention in relationships because people feel more connected when they experience genuine presence, rather than divided attention. I did not need a complicated marriage strategy. I needed to look up from my phone. I needed to listen. And, interestingly, the same skill Daniel taught me in business helped me at home. Listening before responding worked with customers, and it worked with my husband. When my children asked questions, I stopped trying to answer while doing 3 other things. I looked at them. I listened. I laughed. Some evenings were still difficult. There were bills, deadlines, tired parents, and children who suddenly needed something exactly when I had an important call. That is family life. Nobody sends you a calendar invitation before chaos arrives. But slowly, our home became calmer. My husband began helping me understand business decisions from another perspective. I began sharing opportunities instead of carrying every worry alone. Then Daniel noticed something during one of our meetings. He looked at my numbers and said, "Your business is improving." I smiled. Then he added, "But your biggest improvement is not here." He pointed toward my communication notes. "You are learning to listen." I thought the lesson was finished. It was not. The following month, a major change in American business rules affected one of our plans. And suddenly the strategy Daniel had taught me no longer worked the way we expected. For the first time, my mentor looked concerned. And when he told me what we needed to do next, I realized our biggest challenge was only beginning. America taught me to think differently. The morning Daniel told me our plan had to change, I expected panic. Instead, he handed me a cup of coffee and said, "Good businesses do not need perfect conditions. They need people who can adapt." I wanted to believe him. Still, I looked at the numbers, the changing requirements, and the work waiting for me, and my confidence began shrinking again. Living in America had taught me that plans can change quickly. Weather changes. Customers change their minds. Companies change policies. Even a quiet Tuesday can suddenly become a day that makes you question every decision you made on Monday. But Daniel was teaching me not to fight every change. He wanted me to understand it first. We reviewed the situation slowly. I asked questions in simple English. What changed? What can we control? What should we do first? Those questions became my new business compass. I noticed something interesting. When I was younger, I believed successful people always knew what to do. Now I understood that successful people often know what question to ask when they do not know what to do. That difference made me calmer. I also began paying closer attention to American business culture around me. People often valued clear communication, punctuality, personal responsibility, and practical solutions. Nobody expected every problem to disappear magically. They expected you to communicate, adjust, and keep moving. At first, that mindset felt uncomfortable. I sometimes wanted more time to think before answering. But gradually, I learned that saying, "I need to check that and get back to you," was better than pretending to know everything. That sentence became one of my favorite English expressions. It protected my honesty and gave me time to find the right answer. At home, I practiced the same mindset. When my children made mistakes, I tried not to react immediately. When my husband and I disagreed, I tried to understand his concern before defending my own opinion. I was beginning to see that business and family had something important in common. People do not need perfection from you. They need reliability. One Saturday, my family and I drove through a small town outside the city. The weather changed suddenly, and heavy rain covered the road. My children laughed in the back seat while my husband joked that my carefully planned weekend had officially become a weather documentary. I laughed too. A few years earlier, unexpected change would have ruined my mood. That day, I simply adjusted the plan. We found a small restaurant, ordered warm food, and enjoyed being together. It was a tiny moment, but I understood something powerful. Adaptability was not just a business skill. It was a life skill. Yet my confidence was about to be tested in a much bigger way. On Monday morning, I opened an email from a customer and saw one sentence that made my heart stop: "We are canceling the project." The project was important. Losing it could damage my growing business. I stared at the screen, unable to move. Then my phone rang. It was Daniel. He had somehow already heard the news. His first question was not, "What happened?" It was, "What are you going to learn from this?" My mentor's hardest business lesson. I stared at the email again, hoping the words might rearrange themselves into something less painful. They did not. The project was gone. I had spent weeks working on it, calling customers, preparing documents, practicing my English, and believing this opportunity could become an important step forward. Now one short email had reduced all that effort to a sentence: "We are canceling the project." I called Daniel and said, "I think I failed." He became quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "Did you lose the project, or did you lose your ability to learn?" I knew immediately that he was going to give me another lesson. I just wished it did not hurt so much. We met that afternoon at the same coffee shop where we had first talked about business. Daniel opened his notebook and asked me to explain everything that happened. I told him about the customer, the communication, the deadline, and the decisions I had made. He listened without interrupting. Then he asked one question: "What could you have noticed earlier?" I reviewed every step. Finally, I realized I had been so afraid of making mistakes in English that I sometimes avoided asking difficult questions. I had wanted to sound confident, so I occasionally stayed quiet when I should have asked for clarification. That was painful to admit. But it was also freeing. Daniel said, "A mistake becomes expensive when you refuse to look at it." That sentence became one of the most important lessons of my business life. Failure was not proof that I was incapable. It was information. I started writing down what I had missed. I needed clearer communication. I needed earlier follow-up. I needed to confirm customer expectations instead of assuming I understood them. Most importantly, I needed to stop treating English mistakes as emergencies. From then on, whenever I did not understand something, I used a simple sentence. Could you clarify that for me? It became one of the most useful phrases in my professional English. I also began reviewing my conversations after meetings. Not obsessively. Just 5 minutes. What did I understand? What did I misunderstand? What question should I have asked? This kind of reflection helped turn uncomfortable experiences into practical learning. Research on learning and memory often points to the value of retrieval and feedback, and I was experiencing that idea in real life. I was not memorizing English in isolation. I was remembering words because they were connected to real decisions and real emotions. At home, my husband noticed the change. I was less defensive when something went wrong. I started saying, I made a mistake, without feeling that I had to hide. My children even began copying me. One evening, my daughter dropped a glass and immediately said, Mom, I made a mistake. I looked at her and smiled. That is okay. Now let's clean it up. Maybe that was the real lesson Daniel had been trying to teach me. Life does not become easier because you stop making mistakes. It becomes easier when mistakes stop controlling you. But just when I began rebuilding my confidence, Daniel gave me a new challenge, one that would force me to make a business decision without his help. Building a better life together. The next challenge arrived on a Tuesday morning, disguised as a simple phone call. Daniel told me he would be away for several weeks and would not be available to guide me through every business decision. My first reaction was almost embarrassing. I wanted to ask, can I wait until you come back? But I stopped myself. A few months earlier, I would have depended on him for every difficult conversation. Now I understood why he had been teaching me so patiently. A mentor is not supposed to carry your business forever. A good mentor helps you become strong enough to carry it yourself. So I opened my notebook and reviewed everything I had learned. Listen carefully. Ask clear questions. Confirm expectations. Admit mistakes. Follow up. Protect your time. Protect your family. None of these lessons sounded dramatic, but together they had changed me. My husband noticed the difference too. I was no longer bringing every business problem to the dinner table. I was learning to separate a difficult workday from the people waiting for me at home. That did not mean life suddenly became perfect. We still had bills, busy schedules, tired evenings, and children who could turn a peaceful room into a small natural disaster in under 30 seconds. But our family had become a team. My husband started helping me review certain decisions. Sometimes he asked questions I had not considered. Sometimes I disagreed with him. Sometimes we both stared at the numbers and decided we needed dessert before making any serious decision. Honestly, dessert became a surprisingly effective business strategy. More importantly, we began talking about our future differently. We were not only trying to survive difficult months. We were planning for a better life. I also changed the way I practiced English. Instead of studying long vocabulary lists, I chose words from my real life. Customer, deadline, invoice, trust, schedule, responsibility, follow-up. I made simple sentences and said them aloud while driving or cooking. I repeated conversations in my mind. If I made a mistake, I corrected it and continued. This approach felt less like studying and more like living. My children sometimes listened and laughed when I practiced pronunciation in the kitchen. I laughed too. There was no perfect classroom, and I did not need one. My life had become my classroom. Then came the moment I had been preparing for. A new client contacted me about a project larger than anything I had handled alone. Daniel was still away. My husband looked at me and asked, "Are you ready?" I wanted to say yes immediately. Instead, I took a breath and said, "I am not completely ready. But I know how to learn." That sentence surprised even me. I remembered the woman who once froze when a business owner asked why he should trust her. Now I was standing in the same kind of situation, but something inside me had changed. I scheduled the meeting. I prepared my questions. I reviewed the details. And when the client arrived, I did not try to sound impressive. I simply listened. The conversation went better than expected. Then the client made an offer that could change my business completely. There was only one problem: accepting it would require my family to make a difficult sacrifice. The day I finally trusted myself. The offer looked almost too good to be real. The new client wanted me to handle a much larger project, and the money could give our family more stability. I should have felt excited. Instead, I felt nervous. The project required more time, more responsibility, and several long meetings each week. I knew exactly what that could mean. Less time with my children. Less time with my husband. More pressure. I took the proposal home and placed it on the kitchen table. My husband read it quietly. Then he looked at me and asked, "What do you want?" That question stopped me. In the past, I would have asked Daniel what he thought. I would have searched for someone else's answer. This time, I had to listen to myself. I told my husband that I wanted the opportunity, but I did not want success to cost us our family life. We talked for a long time. There was no magical solution. We had to make practical changes. I would accept the project, but we would set clear working hours. My husband would help with some responsibilities at home. We would protect certain evenings for family. I would also tell the client honestly what I could and could not promise. That last part was difficult. I had learned that business sometimes rewards confidence, but confidence does not mean saying yes to everything. Real confidence means knowing your limits. The next morning, I called the client. My English was calm. I explained the schedule, the responsibilities, and the boundaries we needed. I expected resistance. Instead, the client said, "I appreciate your honesty." That sentence felt like a small victory. I realized I was no longer trying to prove that I was perfect. I was trying to become trustworthy. The project began. There were difficult days. One customer misunderstood an email. Another wanted a faster deadline. A meeting ran longer than expected. But I handled each problem differently. I asked questions. I listened. I clarified. I followed up. I did not panic when I forgot a word in English. If I needed a moment, I took one. If I needed help, I asked. My speaking became smoother because I was no longer fighting my own fear every second. My family also adapted. My children learned that Mom sometimes had meetings, but they also knew when Mom would put the phone away. My husband and I became better at communicating before problems became arguments. One evening, after a long week, we sat on the porch while the children played nearby. My husband smiled and said, "You are different now." I asked, "Better?" He laughed. "More yourself." I looked at the house, my family, and the life we were slowly building. For the first time, I understood that my mentor had never been teaching me how to become someone else. He had been teaching me how to trust the person I already was. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Daniel. He had returned to town. His message contained only 6 words: "We need to talk about your future." I smiled, but I had no idea that his next lesson would completely change my definition of success. Success means more than money. Daniel was waiting for me at our old coffee shop, sitting near the window with 2 cups of coffee. When I walked in, he smiled and pointed to the empty chair. I sat down, expecting another business lesson about numbers, customers, or growth. Instead, he asked, "Are you happy?" I almost laughed. After everything we had discussed, that seemed like the easiest question in the world. But it was not. I thought about my business, my husband, my children, our home, and the difficult months behind us. Finally, I said, "I am tired, but yes. I am happy." Daniel nodded. Good. Then do not build a business that destroys the life you are happy to live. I wrote that sentence in my notebook. It became one of the most important lines I had ever heard. I used to believe success meant earning more money, becoming more confident, and proving that I could compete in the American business world. Those things mattered, but they were not the whole story. What was the point of a successful business if I was too busy to hear my children laugh? What was the point of impressive English if I could not use simple words to tell my husband, "Thank you, I need help," or "I love you"? What was the point of growth if I constantly felt afraid of losing everything? Daniel helped me understand that success should support your life, not replace it. I began changing my goals. Instead of asking only, "How much can I earn?" I asked, "What kind of life am I building?" That question changed my decisions. I became more careful about the clients I accepted. I stopped saying yes to every opportunity. I created clearer working hours. I protected family evenings. I continued practicing English, but now my goal was communication, not perfection. I wanted to understand people, explain ideas, and feel comfortable speaking even when my grammar was not perfect. That was enough. My children noticed too. One evening, my son asked, Mom, are you still doing your business? I smiled and said, yes. He looked at me and asked, do you like it? I answered, I do. Then he said, good. You smile more now. That tiny sentence nearly made me cry. Children notice things adults sometimes ignore. They do not care about your revenue report. They notice whether you laugh at dinner. They notice whether you are listening. They notice whether your eyes are tired when you say everything is fine. My life in America had become less about proving myself and more about building something meaningful. My English was improving because I used it every day. My marriage was stronger because I listened more. My business was healthier because I finally understood my limits. And Daniel was still there, but I no longer needed him to tell me what to do. One afternoon, he gave me back the notebook I had carried into our first meeting. On the first page, I had written, how can I become successful? He turned the page and said, now write a better question. I looked at the blank page for a long time. Then I wrote 5 words. What kind of life matters? Daniel smiled. But there was still one final lesson he wanted me to learn, and this time, it was not about business at all. The lesson I will never forget. Daniel looked at the words in my notebook and smiled. That is your real business plan, he said. I laughed because, after all those meetings, contracts, numbers, mistakes, and difficult conversations, the most important lesson had become surprisingly simple. I did not need to build a perfect life. I needed to build a life I could be proud to live. Today, I still live in the United States with my husband and our children. Our days are not perfect. Sometimes work becomes stressful. Sometimes my English still surprises me with a word I suddenly forget. Sometimes my children argue over something so small that I wonder if they are secretly training to become lawyers. And sometimes my husband and I disagree. But our life feels different now. We know how to listen before reacting. We know how to say, I need help. We know how to admit, I made a mistake. Those simple sentences have become part of our family language. My business has also changed. I no longer measure every month only by money. I look at relationships, trust, customer satisfaction, time with my family, and whether I am still learning. I continue practicing English through real conversations. I read simple business stories. I listen to slow English. I repeat useful sentences aloud. I do not wait until my English is perfect because I finally understand that perfect English is not the goal. Connection is the goal. Communication is the goal. Being brave enough to speak is the goal. Looking back, I sometimes think about that first question, why should I trust you? At that time, I thought I needed the perfect answer. Now I know the answer was never a sentence. Trust is built through small actions repeated over time. You listen. You keep your promises. You tell the truth when something goes wrong. You learn. You improve. You show up again. My mentor taught me business, but his greatest lesson was much bigger than business. He taught me that a mentor should not create dependence. A good mentor helps you discover your own strength. And perhaps that is why I remember him so clearly. He did not give me a shortcut. He gave me questions. Those questions changed the way I worked, the way I practiced English, the way I communicated with my husband, and the way I raised my children. If you are learning English right now and you feel frustrated, remember my story. You do not need to understand every word today. You do not need to speak perfectly. Start with one sentence. Listen again. Read slowly. Say it aloud. Then use it in your real life. Progress can be quiet. Sometimes you will not notice it until one day you suddenly realize you are speaking to someone you once feared speaking to. That happened to me. And perhaps it can happen to you too. My journey taught me that success is not always the biggest house, the highest income, or the most impressive title. Sometimes success is sitting at your dinner table, hearing your children laugh, looking at the person you love, and knowing that despite every difficult season, you kept going. If one person can teach you a lesson that changes your direction, then perhaps you can become that person for someone else. Share what you learned, keep practicing, and never be ashamed of starting slowly. Because sometimes the smallest English sentence can open the door to a much bigger life.